Originally, we were thinking of doing this on the first Tuesday of every month, and then we realized that Election Day was the last Tuesday, so we moved it to this week. And then I think next month it's going to be on the first Tuesday again of the month. We are basically doing this series as a kind of a support group for folks as we are starting to transition in New York City into the next generation science standards, as well as the new labs and stuff like that. So the first one we had was on October 1st, and now this is our second one. And it's primarily because in New Jersey, we have actually been doing NGSS for about 10 plus years now. So we've kind of have had a lot of exposure to it, and we've been looking a lot at how NGSS works and what the shifts are in the pedagogy and things like that. But like I said, I've been teaching biology. This is my 19th year teaching bio and biotech there in Montgomery. And if you're trying to figure out where Montgomery is, it's kind of just outside of Princeton, the Princeton area. So we're in that central Jersey band of the state. And so by day, I do that. By night, I do workshops here at STEM Teachers NYC for biology. So you may have seen a couple of the workshops before and stuff like that. So I'll just go around the Zoom room and just start calling out names of whoever's, like, whatever name is on the screen. And if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, why you're here, and where you teach, some info, that anything interesting you'd like to share, feel free.
I'm Alicia Redway. I'm a teacher in Yonkers, New York. I teach 7th grade earth science, and occasionally I do teach the life science course. And so I just wanted to just stay abreast of some of the changes that are taking place with the New York State Science Learning Standards in terms of the implementation.
Like Dr. Redway, I am a science teacher in Yonkers, and we are actually giving the new assessment in June of 2025 for the first time it's being offered. I teach the life science component, and I have colleagues that teach earth science. So whatever I can learn from here is what I'll be taking back and sharing.
My name is Simone Webb. I teach at a charter school called Creo College Prep in Bronx, New York. I have been a living environment teacher for 3 years in New York City schools. And this is the first year that I'm working with the school to build our own curriculum that is NGSS standardized and just aligned. And it's been a really exciting opportunity just to see like what components can be brought in from other Regents courses, but most importantly, just preparing the students for high school. I teach an 8th grade course at this time, and even though it is accelerated for the students, it gives them a really great window into science, and I really want them to have that access. And my hope is that if we do transition, or if my students transition into another school where they have to take this life science course, that they feel confident and prepared and aware of the exploratory experience with science.
I teach Long Island City, New York, teach both living environment and science. So I'm here to prepare my students for getting some new resources for the new NGSS curriculum, especially the labs, there's the new ones. So I'm here to prepare my students for the living environment exam.
I'm Julia. I've been teaching for 24 years, 17 years, the living environment, and now we transition to biology. And I am like feeling like a brand new teacher all over again. I'm struggling with the curriculum. I'm struggling with the labs. I teach middle school, 8th grade, and I guess our biggest challenge is our kids are taking biology for the first time in 8th grade because the Regents was to replace 8th grade. So what I'm finding this year is that there is a huge gap that's missing, and I am struggling on filling in 8th grade content plus the new bio stuff. And that's where I'm at right now.
Okay. Is there a particular curriculum you're using in 8th grade?
So we're supposed to be following the New Visions curriculum, but it's just not working out.
Mm. What do you find is the biggest kind of hurdle that you're hitting?
Because they're in 8th grade, they don't have the background or the content to ask those amazing questions that is supposed to come out of the discovery. And so, you follow through with it, and then they don't ask the questions, and they don't have the content that's not being taught for them that they're just supposed to discover. It's just not happening with all the students. So you have a few that get it, and then the majority that's not. And then it's not comfortable for me to just move forward for the kids that have it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I saw a couple people nodding too. I think I saw Lindsay, you nodding kind of along with that same sentiment.
Yes, that's the
Also,
same.
Alicia, the same. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the big struggles that I hear the most about is like, how do we get students to kind of rediscover or discover some of this stuff? Like NGSS is wanting them to do, and like New Visions and things like that is wanting them to do.
I wanted to point out that Dr. Redway shared something in the chat for Julia. So or is it I think it was Julia. So take a look at that.
I'm just going to pull that up right now and check out Harvard. Yes, I was thinking of the QFT method.
It's amazing. I can't say enough good things about. I know sometimes people abbreviate it and call it QFT, but it is. And when you get to Project Zero it's Harvard, all of the stuff is created by Harvard. It is a smorgasbord, a cornucopia of all these great strategies of visualizing students thinking. But this particular technique, I think, really enhances students' ability to ask questions. It gives you PowerPoint that you could use for any phenomenon, anything that you want to have students generate questions for.
I did a workshop about a year ago now, and QFT was a big part of that workshop, or at least the QFT methodology was a big chunk of it. I'm Rowan, and I teach 8th grade life science at IS 201 in Brooklyn. I just want to learn more about the new life science required investigation labs and more about the new curriculum.
Hi, my name is Eunice. I teach biology at MS51 in Brooklyn. This is my 2nd year teaching, and it's the first year my school used New Vision, so I'm here to learn about the New Vision curriculum.
But if you scroll down to slide 15, the actual title at the top here is a hyperlink. So if you were to click on that, what I did was I started to put all the New York State document lists together or all those documents together into one kind of Google Doc. So you can access every single one of them just from the one spot. So you don't have to go hunting and searching and stuff like that. And so there are 3 new state labs, which I'm sure you've heard a little bit about. One of them is about called the Balancing Act, which is about homeostasis and maintaining homeostasis. Just that's very broad idea. One of them is called For the Birds, which is an engineering task. So one of the things that NGSS has in it is some engineering practices thrown in there too. So for those that are not as familiar with NGSS, there are 3 dimensions to every sort of section of NGSS. There's the content, also known as the DCIs. There's the cross-cutting concepts, which are the CCCs for short. And then there's the SCPs, which are the science and engineering practices. And ideally, all lessons should have all those 3 elements put into it. So For the Birds is sort of New York State's way of getting at some of those engineering standards that NGSS actually has as a part of them. And if you're unfamiliar with that, just let me know, and we can go back and I can pull up the practices so you can kind of see what they look like. And then the third lab, which I heard some people saying were they're a little bit worried about, was the Mystery of Lactose Intolerance lab, which is all about enzymes and regulation again. So in this, the students are involved in doing experiments with lactase and lactose. So my game plan, at least what I thought would be most helpful, is to kind of start by giving you time in some groups to just kind of start to explore those 3 labs if you're not familiar with those 3 labs, and to start kind of coming up with some of your own questions that you had about those labs. So my original thinking with this, and I am open to ideas too for whatever is useful for you all. But like I said, my original thinking for this is to kind of give a little bit of time, because I know we have so much time in our day anyway, just to think and explore about some of this stuff. The labs, so you can go and take a look at some of that documentation. And in your groups, I do have some questions that go along with those labs. And I posted them on the Google Slides. So there's 5 kind of bigger sort of overarching questions that I'd like your groups to think about and to jot down some ideas and some answers on. So does that sound like an okay plan and use of time? And then when we reconvene, we can start to talk a little bit about some of those questions that folks have that are specific.
We don't want teachers to think that there is just one model that's correct, because what the literature shows is that teachers tend to have the misconception that this is just the right answer, but there are many permutations that the students are going to give you that are correct. And that's one of the beautiful things, and I know this sounds strange me saying this, that's one of the beautiful things about this new set of standards in this new exam, is that so many answers that the kids will give you will be right. And I think that when the state, if they ever put out a video, which they're not going to, it only sort of distorts that, and people start to think that's the right answer, but it's not, because there's so many different answers that are possible. And in a way, it's good for our kids, because now we're like, we can give them points for this because so many answers are possible. And that's one of the beauty that I love about this new state test.
I think the model in NGSS world has a very different meaning than model in like teacher prep world. when we say we model something as teachers, usually what we mean is we're saying, okay, I'm going to demonstrate how we're going to do something, and then we're going to all kind of do it together. And I want you to kind of follow along with the same sort of patterns and behaviors and whatever that for whatever task that the students are doing. In NGSS, the way they're kind of defining the model is it's any representation of a process. So any biological process. So that could be a diagram that shows a particular process, let's say photosynthesis, or it could be a written description of NGSS in that process, or it could be a video, or it could be a simulation. Anything that really gets at a conceptual idea, that represents a conceptual idea of a biological process, that's what NGSS calls a model. So when they're saying, hey, make a model of this, they can represent, there's different representations, there's different ways that the students can represent that particular model. And so that's where I think, Alicia, like you said, there's a range of different ways that students can express that particular biological process. And so that's like one of those science practices that, and cross-cutting concepts, actually, it falls in there too, I would argue.
It falls under both.
Yeah, I would argue both, where, scientists use that stuff all the time. They use those representations all the time. They use simulations as a model. Like they do all of that. And so it's kind of trying to get kids used to thinking of science in that way, of using and eventually modifying models as new evidence pops up.
Yep.
So it's kind of a very different definition than when we think of, like, as from our teacher hats on and saying, okay, we're going to model something for you. That's really what they're trying to say. So I hope that kind of like clarifies some things a little bit, because I definitely heard a lot of talk about what the heck a model is and stuff in some groups.